This weekend is round one of the 2024 Rugby Championship, and in this video I'm going to cover the first game that's being played in this year's competition between Australia and South Africa. Let's get into it right now. G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you haven't been here before, my name is Mark. I'm a Kiwi bloke living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and I love making videos about rugby. I also love reading your comments about what you think about the topics that we make on these videos. Now today I'm going to be talking about the first game in this year's Rugby Championship. It's going to be played at Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane, Australia, between the home country Australia and the visitors South Africa. Now, a really interesting battle this one, because we've got Joe Schmidts up against Rassie Erasmus. Of course, those two have got a lot of history, and it's great to see that Joe Schmidts is now in charge of this Wallabies team. It's going to be interesting to see how he goes throughout this year's competition. Let me know what you think of Joe Schmidts' performance as head coach of the Australian Wallabies so far in his tenure. He's had 3 wins from 3 games. Now, one of the many things I'm going to be looking at throughout this year's competition in the Rugby Championship is just to see how well these teams are travelling and playing. So it's going to be interesting to see how Australia fare up when they go to Argentina, but also how New Zealand go in South Africa, and how South Africa obviously go in this first 2 games against Australia in Australia. The first game in Brisbane, as I said. The second game is going to be played at Perth at Optus Stadium. So let's have a look at the 2 teams that have been selected to play in this first game, and we'll start off by looking at the South African Springboks, and in particular in their forwards. And in the front row, no real surprises here at all. We've got Oxenchair, we've got Bonami, and we've got Frans Malherbe. Moving on to the locks, and we've got Eben Etzebeth, and we've got Schneemann in there at lock. And then the loosies in this game for the Springboks, we've got Sia Kolesi, of course, and we've got Peter Steph de Toy. And then at number 8, we've got Lowe coming in there to play at number 8 in this game. And that's interesting because in the last few games we've seen Kwagga Smith at number 8. Lowe is damn good, and I'm sure he's going to do a great job. And Kwagga Smith is going to go to the bench. So that's the forwards for the Springboks in this game. Can't find any faults there as far as I'm concerned. Let me know in the comments. Is there anybody that you thought might have made the team against Australia that hasn't been given a go in this particular game? I'll be really interested to know your thoughts on that one. So that's the forwards that have been selected for the Springboks for this first game. Let's have a look at their backs now. And of course, Faf de Klerk has been out with an injury for this series, so he won't be starting at halfback. And in his place, we've got Cobus Reinhardt that's coming in. And we've got a new pairing actually at 9 and 10 for the Springboks in this game, with Sasha Feinberg Mongoma Zulu coming in at number 10, and that's going to be exciting for everybody in Australia and everybody watching from around the world to see how Sasha goes in this particular game. He's played pretty well since he's put on the Springbok jersey this year, that's for sure. And then outside him, we've got the same old pairing in the centres that we're used to, Damien Diolande and Jesse Creel. And of course, those guys are instrumental in giving South Africa a great platform, both going forward but also in defence. Then on the wings in this game, we've got Kurt Lee Arenza, and on the other wing we've got Cheslin Colby, and at fullback we've got Willie LaRue. So a very, very good South African team, I think, being put on the park. I'm very interested in how that 9 and 10 combination is going to work for them in this opening game against Australia. Okay, having a look at the bench now for the South Africans, and having a look at their forwards. And yes, we've got the bomb squad coming on. It's Malcolm Marx, it's Steenkamp, it's Vincent Koch, it's Jason Dixon, it's Marco van Staden, and it's Kwagga Smith. So those are the 6 forwards that'll come in off the bench for the Springboks. So an enormous amount of talent coming off the bench for the Springboks in this game once again. And their depth really shows through their selection, don't they, in this particular Rugby Championship. And then looking at the back replacements, we've got Grant Williams and we've got Andre Pollard. And I'm sure those two are going to add their spice to the game as well. I'm sure Pollard will come on if Sasha has any kicking woes. And if Australia are having a good pressure against the Springboks, I think we might see Pollard introduced to the game to bring his experience if things start to get a little bit tired. And of course, Grant Williams brings an ultimate amount of pace and speed to that halfback replacement, so it'll be interesting to see what time of the game that Rassie decides to bring him on. So there we go, that's the Springboks team to play against Australia in round 1 of this year's Rugby Championship. A very strong team. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Is there anybody missing from that list that you would have in that team for this first game against Australia? Now, this is Joe Schmidts' 4th selection of a Wallabies team since he's been in charge of the Australian team. And it's been interesting to watch because he's having to play around with a lot of different experimental positions with different players because of injury. Like a lot of the head coaches, they've got a lot of injury problems within their greater squad. And Joe Schmidt is missing quite a few key players from this particular game against South Africa. And in fact, in this series in the Rugby Championship, and I'm sure that's going to have an impact on the Australians' performance, missing some of those key players. And I'm talking about the likes of Kurtley Beale, Gleeson, and someone else that really sticks out is Fraser McWright is not going to be taking part in this year's Rugby Championship because of injury. And this is going to be a big blow, I think, to Australia as they go through the series, because if they have any other injuries, then their depth is going to be called upon. And that's really the big difference, isn't it, between some of the top teams like Australia and New Zealand, like South Africa and New Zealand, versus what the Wallabies are trying to deal with at the moment. But we'll have to see how they go. Now let's have a look at the team that Joe Schmidt has selected for this first game against South Africa. In the front row we've got Kailea, Faisler and Alalotoa, and I think that's a pretty good front row. They're up against it though, against a very experienced and a very strong South African front row, so it's going to be interesting to see how they go for the whole time that they're on the field, these 3 guys. So then moving on to the locks for the Wallabies, and we've got Nick Frost and we've got Salakaya Lotto, and he's been playing really good rugby, so going to be interesting to see how he goes in this big test against the likes of Etzebeth and R.G. Schneemann for the Springboks. And then moving into the loosies for a Wallabies, and this is interesting, Rob Valetini has gone into the number 6 jersey for this game, and I think that's a very interesting move with Valetini going into number 6. On the other Lucy, we've got Tizano, who's going to be making his debut. A lot of noise around this guy. I think he comes from Queensland. Haven't seen him play before, so going to be really interesting to see how he goes. And boy, has he got a test up against these Lucies from South Africa. And then at number 8 for Australia, we're going to see Wilson in there at number 8. So this Wallaby pack, I think, has got a lot of potential. They're going to get really tested this weekend, of course, against the Springboks. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they go. Now, let me know in the comments if you think anyone's been a little bit unfortunate in missing out on starting in this Wallaby pack. I'd be interested to read your comments on that one. Moving into the Wallabies backline, and this is an area where I think Joe Schmidt's got himself a little bit settled on a couple of positions, and I think he's still playing around with some others. And the one I think he's settled on is Jay Gordon at halfback. I think he's been playing pretty well, and he gets another go this weekend against the Springboks. Then at number 10 we see Lolasio, and again, I like this guy. He's a little bit sensitive and temperamental around his goal kicking sometimes. We'll see how he performs at Suncorp on Saturday, but that's one area of his game that we need to look out for, and whether or not he's going to be able to get this Australian backline away with good distribution. Outside him, we've got Paisami, and Paisami's been playing really well. Another player that's got a lot of potential, I think. And then outside centre, we've got Ikitau, and he's come in for Fluke, so that's going to be interesting to see how Ikitau goes. A good player, seen him play a lot of times in the past, and when he's on his game, he can beat any defence in the world, but he's up against Jesse Creel and Damien Diolandi, so that's going to be a great battle. Then moving out to the wings, and we've got Dalganu, who's been scoring good tries for the Wallabies. He's really settled into this team very well. And on the other wing, we've got Callaway, so no room for Corabetti in this team for Australia this particular weekend. At fullback, we see Tom Wright coming in again, and we saw him playing very well against Wales, in particular Tom Wright, and going to be interesting to see how he goes this weekend. So that's the starting backline for the Wallabies. Same story on this one. Anybody that you feel should be in that backline, let me know in the comments below. Okay, so we know the bomb squad's going to come on for South Africa, so what's the Australian bench looking like? So let's have a look at it now. And starting off in the forwards, and we've got Nasser, Joe Schmidts, of course, and what a lot of experience he brings on for the Australians. Nongor, Williams and Reimer. So a good bench for Australia, but they're up against it with this vast experience in the Springboks. And I think that's where one of the areas where I think the Springboks are going to have the difference against the Wallabies on Saturday. And then the backs on the bench, we're going to see McDermott, the halfback, coming in. Tom Lynagh, of course, Michael Lynagh's son. And the final one, Pietsch. And he's been playing well when he's been coming off the bench. Dylan has. So going to be good to see how those three go. But they're up against it with a very, very strong bench from South Africa. So there's the Aussies lineup for this game. They're starting 15 as well as their players coming off the bench. Let me know in the comments if you think there's any players that have been unfortunate in missing out. And of course, let me know what you think about the impact of those players that are either injured or not available for the Rugby Championship this year. I'd like to know your thoughts around that one and how much of an impact you think that's going to have with this Wallabies team. Okay, so what's going to happen in this game? What do I think is going to happen? Well, there's a few things that we need to watch out for. First of all, it's a full house at Suncourt Stadium on Saturday for this game. So close to 50,000 people are going to be in the stand, and I think this is a great thing. I've seen a few comments online that people are wondering why this has happened. It seems a bit strange that people are turning up in these numbers to watch the Australians play in Brisbane. Well, that's not the case, and let me give you a little bit of first-hand experience after living in Brisbane for a number of years. There's a lot of us there, a lot of Kiwis, and we love our rugby and we love our rugby league, and rugby league is a big town, well, Brisbane's a big town for rugby league in Australia. So the crowds love going along to Suncorp and watching their league boys. They get 40-odd thousand to a local derby league game in Brisbane. So when the South Africans, the world champions, come to town, you've got all the Kiwi rugby supporters who live in Queensland, you've got all the Australians that love the Wallabies, and you've got a lot of the league fans that want to get along and watch this game as well. So that's why Suncorp has sold out this weekend for this particular game. So we've got home ground advantage, and that's been a really big thing for the Wallabies. They've done very well in Brisbane over the years, and they see it as a little bit of a fortress. So it'll be interesting to see whether the South Africans go in with that kind of psychology and whether it has an impact on them at all. But we cannot and we should not discount the fact that the South Africans are coming into this game as back-to-back double world champions from last year's Rugby World Cup. They had a very tough series against Ireland that got them prepared for this Rugby Championship. And I think that Rassie Erasmus has picked a very good team to go out, even with some changes that he's been forced to make in terms of Reinhardt as well. And I think that we're going to see a very good South African performance. Now, what gets it for me is I think across the course of 80 minutes, I think the South African team's going to be too strong, too fast, and too creative for this Australian team. And I say that because I think with the bench that's going to come on for the Springboks, they're going to be able to keep that power and that platform going for the whole 80 minutes. And I think that's going to be a very big thing against this Australian pack. And then when the South Africans do get the ball out wide, they've got so much potential with Arendse on the wing, who loves scoring tries. Of course, Cheslin Colby, who also can elude a defensive line at any time. And they've got that wily old fullback in Willie LaRue, who can read a game very well and settle things down from the back. So I think the South Africans have too much class and too much experience across the board for the Wallabies. I say it a lot in my videos recently, and I think it's important to note is that discipline is going to be a big thing in this game. These two teams are going to come out going at it for the first 20 minutes in this game, and there's going to be some very big hits going in, and there's going to be some very big battles going on for each team to try and get some supremacy in the game, and that's where things can go awry. There can be a missed tackle, there can be a tackle done in the wrong technique pattern, and we can find ourselves with a yellow card very quickly. So watch out for discipline being very important in the beginning. Watch in particular the first 20 minutes, because as a result of those disciplinary issues, we might see a penalty try, we might see a couple of penalties given that allow one of the teams to get the scoreboard ticking over, and I think that's going to be very important. Now, the team that scores first in Brisbane will usually ends up winning the game 84% of the time, so you can just see how important it is at the Suncourt Stadium to get a lead on early on in the game. So that's going to be another interesting statistic to watch throughout this game. Another thing that I'll be keeping my eye on is how many points each team scores in the second half, because I think that's going to be a really important thing in this year's Rugby Championship. How good are teams either consolidating a lead if they go to a lead at halftime, or whether they're chasing a game in the second half. And I suspect that we might see the South Africans in the lead at halftime, and that's going to put a lot of pressure on the Wallabies to come out in the second half and chase the game. So that's going to be one of the areas that I'm going to be taking a really closer look at in this particular game. But I think the Springboks are going to actually cook the books on this one. I think they're going to tear down the Suncorp fortress for Australia, and they're going to get over the finish line in this one by about 10 points. That's what I'm calling in this game. I think the Wallabies are going to be really up to go at the South Africans in this game, particularly the guys that are starting for the first time in the Wallaby jersey, those that are inexperienced. I think they see the South Africans as a wonderful challenge. They're going to be highly motivated by Joe Schmidts and his coaching crew, and by the full-out sellout crowd that's going to be there at Suncorp Stadium on Saturday. So expect it to be a very, very big battle. I think we're going to see some good running rugby as well. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what Sasha Feinberg can do in number 10 for South Africa, and whether he can use his creativity, not only himself to create opportunities, but also to put the rest of his backline away. And I think this is something that the South Africans are going to be working more and more on as we head towards the next Rugby World Cup. They want to see that dynamic, creative, innovative opportunity in their backline to put more points on the board. And that's exactly why Mr. Brown has joined that coaching group there in South Africa. So there you go. I'm calling it a South African win in this first game against Australia at Suncorp on Saturday. Let me know in the comments what you think and how you think it's going to go. Who are those players that you're going to be keeping your eye on throughout this game? Because I think it's going to be really interesting from both sides of it. And will Joe Schmidts get his 4th win in a row in 2024? That's the big question. Most of you on my poll on my community page, if you check that out, over 80% of you are saying South Africa are going to win this game. So let's see how your predictions go after the game. Don't forget, I'll be back after the game with a full in-depth analysis of the game, talking about those players that stood out for me and those that didn't have a very good game, along with an in-depth analysis of blow by blow of the game, and let you know what my views are around that one. So if this interests you, make sure you hit the subscribe button, become part of our rugby global community here on Inside Rugby with Mark. We're growing this channel fast, and it's great to have you on board from all over the world of rugby. If you've liked this particular video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and a like, and share it with your mates as well, and tell them about this Kiwi bloke that's making rugby videos from Mexico. I'll be back again soon with some more content. Until then, stay safe, stay well everyone, keep enjoying your rugby no matter where you are in the world, and I look forward to a fantastic game at Suncorp Stadium on Saturday. Until next time, it's farewell from beautiful Mexico. Bye for now.